to the AI Campa Show's second season of Pokemon Universe.
Please subscribe and give like. Enjoy.
Imagine buying a sequel to your favorite movie, right?
Okay.
And halfway through watching it, you realize they've actually hidden the entire first movie inside it as a bonus.
That would be wild.
Right. But in 1999, a cultural juggernaut did exactly that. But pulling off that kind of miracle, well, it required completely shattering the established rules of handheld gaming.
It really did.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled you're joining us. And if you are here because you want to unpack something genuinely fascinating, without getting bogged down in endless information overload, you are in exactly the right place.
Absolutely.
Today, our mission is to explore the legacy of the Johto region. We are pulling from a comprehensive retrospective that compares 3 monumental releases, Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal.
And looking at the source material, I mean, this is far more than just a simple nostalgia trip.
That was for sure.
What we have here is a really brilliant case study in game design, technological problem solving, and honestly, player psychology.
Yeah, because the core question we want to explore with you today is basically this. How did these 3 games, which are set in the exact same region using the exact same core mechanics, how did they manage to deliver wildly different emotional experiences?
Right.
And ultimately, when all the dust settles, which one truly reigns supreme?
It's such a compelling question because these games didn't just, define a generation of players. They proved that the entire concept of Pokemon was this lasting legacy.
Yeah, other than just a passing 90s fad.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this because let's start with the foundations.
Yeah.
Before we get into the stylistic differences between the specific versions, we really have to talk about the massive shift that Generation 2 Second represented.
We do.
Looking at the retrospective, it wasn't just more of the same. Was Gemtastic essentially the equivalent of cinema moving from silent films to talkies?
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Like, it wasn't just a sequel. They fundamentally changed the dimension of reality the player existed in.
Yeah.
For instance, the day and night cycle. Today, a game changing from day to night is, totally standard.
Right. We expect it.
But on a tiny monochrome Game Boy screen, how did that actually impact the player experience?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it was a complete paradigm shift because of how it worked mechanically. The game cartridge actually had a tiny battery inside it running a real-time clock.
Wait, an actual physical clock in the plastic cartridge?
Yes. It was checking your real-world time. So if you were playing under the covers with a flashlight at midnight...
Which we all did.
Exactly. The in-game world was dark. The music shifted to a quieter tone. Completely different nocturnal creatures would emerge from the grass. The game was actively acknowledging your physical reality.
That is just mind-blowing for the time. It's like the game was peering through the screen into your bedroom.
It really was.
You're no longer just visiting a static map whenever it's convenient for you. You are stepping into an ecosystem that keeps moving, even when you turn the device off.
Yes, it breaks the fourth wall in a very subtle structural way. And they layered so much on top of that living world.
Like what?
Well, they introduced breeding, which might sound like just another side activity.
Right.
But it revolutionized the mechanics. It incentivized players to think about the genetics of their creatures, passing down specific moves to offspring.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that underlying logic birthed the entire competitive scene that still exists today.
And speaking of mechanics, I noticed the source material makes a big deal about the introduction of 2 new elements, the Dark and Steel types. But games usually add new weapons or classes just for variety. Was there a specific game design reason they had to invent 2 entirely new types of creatures?
Absolutely. It was a literal game design patch.
A patch?
Yeah, in the first generation of games, the physics of the combat system were famously broken.
Oh, I remember.
Psychic-type Pokemon like Alakazam or Mewtwo, they had virtually no weaknesses. They were completely overpowered and just terrorized the playground battles.
This is so frustrating.
Right. And the developers couldn't just retroactively change the code of the old games.
Because there were no internet updates back then.
Exactly. So they invented dark types, which are completely immune to psychic attacks.
Oh, smart.
And steel types, which resist almost everything. They used new content to act as mechanical counterweights to fix the broken physics of their universe.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
They basically solved a math problem with world building.
They did.
But, we can't talk about these mechanical leaps without addressing the elephant in the room.
Oh, yeah.
The absolute mind-blowing feature that cemented this generation's legacy. The return to Kanto.
Iconic.
For anyone who needs a quick refresher, Kanto is the map from the first games, Red and Blue. You beat Johto, the credits roll, and then you are suddenly allowed to travel back to the entire world from the previous game.
It was incredible.
But I have to ask how. I mean, I remember the Game Boy cartridges having a minuscule amount of memory. How did they physically fit 2 whole maps onto one piece of plastic?
It was a technological miracle, honestly, and it all came down to compression.
Okay.
During development, the team was actually struggling to even fit the new Johto region onto the cartridge.
Really? They were running out of space.
Yeah, but then Satoru Iwata, who would later become the president of Nintendo, he stepped in.
Oh, wow.
He wrote a custom compression algorithm that was so incredibly efficient, it shrunk the file size of the Johto region down to a fraction of what it was.
You're kidding.
Nope. It freed up so much memory that they realized they could squeeze the entire Kanto region onto the remaining space.
So they essentially built a better digital suitcase, realized it was only half full, and decided to pack an entire second game in there just because they could.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
And narratively, it told the player, you know, this universe is much bigger than you thought, and your previous journey still matters.
Yeah.
It was the ultimate respect for the player's investment.
So we have this incredible revolutionary foundation. The clock, the balance mechanics, the compressed double map, stuff that all 3 games share.
Right.
But having established that shared architecture, we need to look at how the games diverged thematically. Because they really did create distinct player experiences right out of the gate with Gold and Silver.
This is where we get into a brilliant study of narrative tone.
Now, I want to challenge the concept of dual releases for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Because usually, when a company releases 2 versions of a game simultaneously, it feels incredibly cynical.
Sure.
It feels like a cash grab. They swap out a few color palettes, make a few items exclusive just to force you to buy both or trade with your friends, and call it a day.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
But reading through the retrospective, that isn't the core differentiator here. So is Gold essentially the bright, triumphant Marvel superhero blockbuster, while Silver is the moody, atmospheric indie film?
What's fascinating here is that the mascots on the boxes aren't just powerful monsters to catch. They represent entirely different philosophies of adventure.
How so?
Let's look at Pokemon Gold first. The mascot for Gold is Ho-Oh, the legendary bird of fire and rebirth. It resides at the very top of the Tin Tower, bathed in sunlight.
And the retrospective notes that Gold feels like the heroic version. Like, it's bright, it's optimistic.
Very much so.
The whole focus is on light and classic heroic mythology. You encounter Ho-Oh in a very central, triumphant, vertical way, right? Like climbing up into the sky. It delivers that traditional extroverted hero's journey.
Exactly. It appeals to a player who wants a grand, mythical adventure. The aesthetics match the name. Gold is shiny, valuable, and outwardly impressive.
Makes sense.
But then you pivot to Pokemon Silver, and the tone shifts in a surprisingly mature direction.
It gets much darker, doesn't it?
It does. Silver features Lugia, the mysterious guardian of the seas. And unlike Ho-Oh, sitting atop a glowing tower,
Right.
Lugia is hidden deep at the bottom of the ocean, inside the dark, labyrinth-like Whirl Islands.
Oh, wow. That's a huge contrast.
Yeah, the atmosphere of Silver is described as calmer, far more introspective. Lugia's lore states that it chose to isolate itself at the bottom of the sea because its power was simply too destructive.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Its story isn't about bright rebirth. It's tied to concepts of isolation, of managing dangerous power, and of finding balance amidst storms.
Which is such a heavy, incredible theme for a game aimed at a younger demographic.
It really is.
Isolation and storms versus fire and rebirth. It's entirely different symbolism. Like, if you played these games as a kid, you probably didn't realize that your choice between a golden or silver cartridge was actually filtering the kind of story you were going to experience.
Exactly.
It wasn't just a color preference. It was a personality test disguised as a video game purchase.
That's a perfect way to frame it. Are you the extroverted hero seeking the spotlight, or the introspective wanderer drawn to the isolation of the deep sea? The developers took the playground tribalism of the 90s, you know, the whole which version do you have argument, and infused it with actual thematic weight. Silver attracts players who prefer mystery and atmosphere over traditional mythology.
So Gold and Silver offered this raw, dual experience, heavily focused on your personal journey and dealing with the return of the villains, Team Rocket. They set the standard.
It did.
But then the developers decided 2 tones weren't enough. A year later, they dropped Pokémon Crystal and everything changed again.
Crystal arrived and fundamentally evolved how stories were told within that exact same Johto framework.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The sources highlight that Crystal introduced animated sprites for the creatures.
Yes.
Now, to modern ears, an animated sprite sounds incredibly basic. But what did that actually do to the player experience at the time?
Well, you have to remember that up until Crystal, every creature you encountered in these games was a static drawing.
Right, just a picture.
They were beautiful illustrations, but they didn't move. Crystal added brief, dynamic animations every time a creature entered the battle.
Oh, there.
Again, it comes back to the philosophy of creating a living world. Suddenly, these monsters were breathing, roaring, shifting their weight. It completely breathed new life into the encounters.
It adds a layer of immersion. But what really stands out to me in the retrospective is the narrative shift. They introduced a dedicated storyline for Suhyun, right?
Yes, a secondary legendary creature.
And tied it to a brand new human character named Yuzine. By injecting this deeper narrative and character choice, did Crystal effectively transition the franchise from a simple collectathon into a true modern RPG?
I would argue it absolutely did, and it's all about how they structured the player's goals.
Okay.
In Gold and Silver, the legendary creatures were largely static finish lines. You climb the tower or dive into the cave, and there they sit, waiting for you to catch them.
Just waiting around.
Right. But Crystal takes Suicune and weaves it into the fabric of the actual journey. You encounter it multiple times across different towns. It runs away from you.
It actively avoids you.
Yeah. And you interact with Yuzine, a rival who was obsessed with catching Suicune himself.
So instead of just checking a box at the end of the game, you're actively participating in an ongoing mystery.
Exactly.
You have a rival who wants the same thing you do, which adds a sense of urgency and competition to the lore. It gives the creature a true purpose beyond just being a shiny trophy.
Precisely. It shifts the game from go here and catch this to follow this trail and uncover the history of this world.
I love that.
It makes Crystal vastly more narrative-driven. The pacing is tighter because you were constantly running into story beats rather than just wandering aimlessly. It feels like the definitive edition, a highly polished synthesis of the raw originality that was found in Gold and Silver.
And we absolutely cannot skip over another massive milestone Crystal introduced, because for the very first time, players were allowed to choose a female protagonist.
Which was a monumental step forward, not just for the series, but for the industry at large.
It's hard to overstate the real-world significance of that.
Totally.
Video games in the late 90s were still heavily marketed under the assumption that the default player was a young boy. By adding a female protagonist, it broadened the audience.
It really did.
It opened the door for so many more players to actually see themselves in the world they were exploring. It changed what a kid's game could be and who it belonged to.
It deepened the personal connection. When you can choose an avatar that represents you, the stakes of the story feel more personal. And as we've seen, that deep personal connection is the ultimate strength of this entire generation.
So what does this all mean? We have all three games fully analyzed and laid out on the table. We have the foundational mechanics that broke the fourth wall.
Right.
The tonal split of Gold's heroism versus Silver's mystery.
Yeah.
And the narrative, inclusive evolution of Crystal. So if we have to make a call, which version is actually the best?
Well, the sources lay out a very clear dual verdict here, depending on the metric you use.
Okay. If we are looking at this purely objectively measuring the features, the pacing, the visual polish, and the narrative structure, Pokemon Crystal is the best version.
It has animated battles. It has the Suicune storyline with Yuzine. It fixes the pacing issues of the original two, and it offers better player representation. Objectively, it wins the technical argument.
But objectivity isn't how we experience art or nostalgia.
No, it isn't. And I have to push back on the very idea of an objective best when we're talking about something so intrinsically tied to emotion and childhood memory.
Sure.
Let's think about it this way. Crystal might be the remastered 4K director's cut. Right?
Sure.
It has the perfect color grading, the crisp audio, and expanded scenes.
Yeah.
It is technically superior. But Gold and Silver, they are the original scratched vinyl records.
Oh, that's a great analogy. They have pops and hisses. They might skip on a track, but that texture is part of the experience.
Exactly. Flaws and all, those original releases are exactly how millions of people remember falling in love with the music in the first place. When you first stepped out into the Johto region, you didn't know the pacing was slightly off.
No.
You were just mesmerized that the sun went down when it got dark outside.
This raises an important question about how we fundamentally value our media, especially in retrospect. Do we prioritize technical refinement and narrative completeness? Or do we prioritize the raw emotional impact of our very first experience?
Yeah, that's tough call.
The retrospective makes it very clear that emotionally, the verdict is completely subjective. Gold and Silver retain this raw original charm. They hold incredible nostalgic weight for players who first stepped into Johto through those specific thematic lenses of light or shadow.
So Johto's true legacy isn't really about the code on the cartridge. It's about how it created unforgettable, unique moments for every single player, regardless of what color the plastic shell of the game was. Crystal refined the formula, but Gold and Silver created the magic.
And that magic proved that this universe was going to endure. It cemented the franchise as a permanent fixture in global pop culture.
So to recap our journey today, we've explored how the Johto generation completely rewrote the rules. They gave us real-time clogs that broke the fourth wall,
Right.
breeding mechanics that birthed competitive play, new elements to fix broken game physics, and the mind-boggling compression trick that allowed Kanto to fit in our pockets.
Incredible stuff.
We unpack the heroic, optimistic mythology of Gold versus the moody, introspective isolation of Silver. And we saw how Crystal catalyzed the series into a true narrative RPG with its focus on story, dynamic animation, and inclusion.
It was a monumental era of design that developers still study today.
So now, we turn it over to you listening. Based on everything we've unpacked today, the hidden mechanics, the thematic weight, the technical polish, which team do you belong to?
Good question.
Are you Team Gold, chasing the bright heroism of Ho-Oh? Are you Team Silver, exploring the calm, atmospheric isolation of Lugia? Or are you Team Crystal, seeking the refined, story-driven definitive experience?
And as you think about your choice, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Consider how the very illusion of choice between these slightly different versions of the exact same world perfectly mirrors our own real-world journeys.
Oh, interesting.
Does knowing there is an alternate path we didn't take, like missing out on the quiet, atmospheric mysteries of Lugia simply because we confidently chose the bright heroism of Ho-Oh, does knowing that other path exists actually make the path we did choose feel that much more meaningful and exclusively ours?
That's a great point.
It's a beautifully human dynamic, engineered right into the foundation of a game that forever altered our reality.